Hi, I'm Matt Goodman. I'm a design and engineering teacher at St. Luke's School in New Canaan, Connecticut. I've been teaching there for 1 year, and before that I was teaching at John Burroughs School in St. Louis, Missouri. In high school, I did the sort of the art sequence. I went to a public high school, so we didn't have any design offerings. It was really just like fine arts. So I created my first really bad art portfolio throughout high school, where it was mostly drawing based. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and my art teacher said I should do industrial design, so I just believed her because I didn't really want to do a very intense college admissions process. And I ended up at Syracuse University mainly because I just wanted to apply for a school in industrial design and be done with it. But I was afraid of going to a real art school because I didn't know what industrial design was. So I wanted to be able to drop out and do something else. And Syracuse offered me that. It was one of the few schools that actually offered that. At Syracuse, first year was very much art school, so it was pretty familiar to me. But then after that, the next 2 years, it was a 5-year program. So year one was very artish. Honestly, didn't have too much to do with anything else we did in college. It was sort of separate. And then years 2 and 3 were very industrial designish. So it was sketching, prototyping, a lot of physical building. We learned SolidWorks. I made a watch that had a fidget spinner on it before fidget spinners were cool. That was pretty awesome. But it was a lot of smaller product design projects like that. And I found I was really good at it, but I didn't love the professional world and the professional offerings. As we moved into 4th and 5th year, we were doing a little bit more UX and UI, so developing surfaces and screen layouts and that type of thing. And while that was happening, I had a couple jobs and internships. I interned at Tumi, which is a luxury bag and suitcase company. They make $400 backpacks. That was sort of my first exposure to the professional design world. I worked with a really incredible team. It forced me to learn Adobe properly because if I didn't know Illustrator, I wasn't going to be able to do anything. But it also opened my eyes to a lot of early career designers are sort of executing a creative director's vision, and it was a lot of sort of repetitive work, and a lot of factors go into things other than the design, what does product development think about different color SKUs, and how much money do we have for each particular brand, and that type of thing. So I left feeling a lot more informed after that internship, but I wasn't totally sure what I wanted to do with myself. And then at the same time, in my 4th and 5th year, I was working at a music venue as a graphic designer, and that was actually what I thought I wanted to do professionally. I wanted to sort of create the assets for touring musicians, and it was really fun because it was super fast paced and nothing had to be perfect. The pay was awful, but those were kind of my professional experiences while I was in college. In 5th year, I did my thesis on marketing live musician tours for musicians who didn't have a big following. So it's how do you get a tour to actually sell out really fast, but then also how do you cut the costs of live music, because what was happening in the industry is streaming kind of took out a lot of the money. So touring was the only way for musicians to make money. So it was all about it actually ended up being digital concert experiences about a year before the pandemic. And so it ended up becoming super relevant. I developed basically VR concert assets that allowed someone to have a tour without having to move from where they were physically. And then a year later, the pandemic happened, and suddenly everyone was doing that. So it's oh, cool, I identified something before it happened out of necessity. So that was kind of a weird experience. After college, I kind of wanted to continue that work. I really wanted to work in entertainment and sort of go the graphic design route. I found that to be something I was good at, and I liked the fast pace of it, even though in hindsight my skills really are much more in the 3D. And so I was unemployed for almost a year. And while I was unemployed, I'd been working at prior to also throughout college, I was doing day camp and overnight camp programs, just doing outdoor education with kids from as young as 4 all the way to 16. And and I really, really loved it. I found I worked harder doing camp than I actually did like in college.
Is there a reason why you started doing those day and night camp? Is it just like a part-time thing you started with? Or?
Yeah, I kind of got into it because it was something to do over the summer that paid okay. I'd been to camp as a kid, and it felt like the next logical step in like my summer life would be to go back and like work there because the money was about the same as retail. But then I was amongst a bunch of people who really hated the job, and I was like, no, this is the best thing ever. And so I kind of had an inkling that I wanted to do teaching, but it was never really something that was encouraged. And
because you were very interested in that VR or graphic design at the stage, right?
Because I had that interest, but also because I was like pretty high up in my class at Syracuse, and so my professors were really pushing me towards design industry because I think they saw me as someone who could like potentially do pretty well in industry and then kind of come back and be sort of an exemplar graduate. My parents were always like, do what you do. They didn't really care. Well, that's not true. They did not care, but they were open to whatever direction I went, which I really appreciate. But in terms of like professional allies, those people were really pushing me towards like the traditional industry world. So when I finished school, I did one more summer at camp, thought that was probably the end of it for me, and then started looking for industry jobs and had a really, really hard time finding work because it was like, you need 3 years experience. I have 0 years experience. I always got outclassed by someone who was just more experienced. And then also, I didn't have much of a portfolio because I had a bunch of work, but we were never really forced to actually develop a brand and a portfolio in college until right at the very end. And so my portfolio needed a ton of work just to be competitive.
Even as a top student, recommended by the professor, you still find it hard as a beginner designer to actually find a job in the US.
Yeah, I found it really difficult. And there were a couple moments where I was very close. I started searching in August. By October, November, I'd done 2 or 3 interviews and got pretty close at a couple companies, but ended up getting outclassed by someone who'd been around for 4 or 5 years. And so at that point, I had talked to a couple teachers in private schools because I didn't know anything about private school. And they were not really sure where I fit into the educational landscape because they were coming from a bit of a more traditional school. But I had a friend who used Carney Sando, which is like a educational recruiting firm, and they recommended I did that. So I did that, and I'm like, okay, I'll do teaching jobs, I'll do design job applications, whatever comes first, that's what I'll do. I got a ton of interest from schools who were like, we're building out our makerspace, we need someone to run this thing, we have never found anyone who actually knows what they're doing, like, can you be our guy? And it wasn't like offers on the spot, but it was basically like, we'll have you come visit, we'll do all the big like interview stuff. And I was like, okay, I think this is probably a field where I can get employed a little bit faster. I did want to prioritize, I didn't want to jump right into like a director of makerspace job because I was noticing like, as I was developing my portfolio and comparing it to other people, I was much more of a generalist than other candidates. So I had lots of varied skills, but never really something that I was specifically good at. And so I wanted a chance to kind of build all those skills before becoming a leader in a school. So I ended up choosing a job. So after like 8 months or 9 months of employment, I got a job at John Burroughs School in St. Louis as a fellow. And so a teaching fellow is like, it's sort of like a teaching internship where it's like a temporary full-time job. And mine was 1 year. They're typically 2, but I was replacing someone on sabbatical. I took that because it was a chance to learn stuff, and I got free housing, and it was an easy, like I was moving from Massachusetts, which is a pretty big move, but all the stuff was provided. So I was like, okay, cool, I can just drive out there. And that's really where the teaching career started. In between getting hired and starting at St. Louis, the pandemic happened. I was hired in February. And so like, everything got all messed up with COVID in education where everything went totally online. So I went to St. Louis not really knowing what to expect. And so St. Louis, we started in a hybrid model where I was teaching kids on Zoom and in person simultaneously. I never had to do the full remote. And my job at St. Louis was mostly teaching introductory, they called it industrial technology, but it was basically like whatever design thinking stuff I wanted to do, with mostly 7th graders, and then I had like high school electives. And that program was very like wood shop-y traditionally. So I came into a place that had like a really nice like wood shop and metal shop and all the fabrication stuff, but they hadn't really done anything with like really design thinking and like rapid prototyping and that type of thing. So I changed up the program to be a lot more focused on how can we generate creative problem solving skills that actually applied to classes outside of industrial technology. I think they really enjoyed it because I moved a lot faster pace. I tried to do a little bit with documentation, having the students do a little bit with graphics and making posters. But the thing with Burroughs was that I got 2 classes per week and academic classes had 4. So I just had substantially less time with all of my students to be able to actually do anything. So it ended up being, for middle school, a lot of design sprints where they were like just learning the fundamentals of how to go through the process. And then for upper school, it honestly ended up being mostly woodshop because that's really where their interests were. I taught a little bit of multimedia, like audio and video, but those aren't really my background. But it was cool to like, my focus on those were really like how to draw inspiration from other artists and how to like do time-based composition. So when you've got like something that runs over the duration of a time, how do you compose in a way that's like grabs your attention and has contrast, just like the same principles as visual design. And that was really fun to kind of discover on my own as I was teaching it because I didn't really know anything. I was just making it all up on the spot. Ultimately, I decided to move to St. Luke's School in Connecticut because Burroughs was a fellowship, so it was temporary. And I did have an offer to stay 1 more year, but I decided to move back closer to home because I wanted to be closer to home. And Burroughs didn't have a full faculty position, so I decided to take a full-time job, like a permanent job at a place closer to home because that was just a better move for me. But Burroughs was really a great starting point because they gave me a lot of freedom. It wasn't super high stakes, and if any school was like well equipped for the pandemic, they really were because they had a lot of space. So at St. Luke's, I'm the design lab teacher. That's what we call our makerspace, and it's really a pretty nice facility. It's one big open room, and we've got a wood shop. We don't have quite as many tools as we did at Burroughs, but we've got everything's pretty much brand new, and it's really in good working condition. So it was exciting to come in because I was really using like top of the line machines, which is exciting for me. And in college, I wasn't really allowed to touch any of the DigiFab machines, but now I like operate the CNC, I operate the laser, and like I get to decide how everything works. And that's a really exciting part of this career. But I also chose St. Luke's because I got the same amount of class time as the academic subjects, whereas at Burroughs I had half as much time. And that's a huge difference in how the students see the work. Like they really view design thinking and engineering as like just as important as English and math and all the other subjects. And that to me was a really like attractive part of the school. For a while I was doing interdisciplinary projects. It was sort of like the educational equivalent of freelance, where like a teacher would come in and say like, I want to do this thing, how do we like actually make it happen? So like for example, I did a project with a Mandarin class where they wanted to make Chinese name stamps. So I created like templates for the students to plug in QR codes for some Mandarin video thing that I had nothing to do with. We used like a Chinese name generator, and me and the teacher worked together to come up with different assets to put into the laser. And then we laser cut all these stamps, and I created like a template that the students could understand to actually put that together. And most of my projects have been like that, where the teacher comes in with an idea, I come up with some way to automate it, and then we have the students do it. I did that for a while, and then the director of the makerspace left, and I was really interested in like teaching classes more so than the collaborative work. So I took that as an opportunity to kind of execute a plan I'd been doing all year, which was creating a sequence of design and engineering classes that the upper schoolers could take to prepare them for that field, but also to be equipped to do the collaborative projects with other teachers. And so the focus of that program is it starts off with 3 classes. that the students have to take 2 of the 3 in order to move up. So it's mechanical engineering, which is like a lot of like CAD and introductory digifab stuff. We're doing a packaging project, which is really exciting. We're learning about jigs and how to like make things in multiples and casting. I do a class called functional sculpture where they're building electric ukuleles, and that's like a lot of hands-on wood shop. And then I'm doing a UX UI class, which is really like digital based products. And so I picked those 3 because they're all totally different in their subject matter, but the same in how you think through a problem. And then they all leave with, while we're doing that, they're developing portfolio slides every week. So they leave each project with a completed portfolio, because not that they would ever use their high school portfolio after college for employment, but when I was unemployed, I didn't have the tools necessary to like be competitive in industry, and I want them to be always thinking about how can I show off my work in a way that's visually exciting and concise and makes sense, because that's like the most, I would argue that's like just as important as being good at designing products. And that's like the thing that will get you employed, is can you actually communicate a story? So those classes sort of fundamentally get them ready for that, and then also show them like there's more than just drawing, there's more than just woodshop. There's like a whole bunch of different intersections of design that they can decide whether or not they like, and that's up to them. But whichever ones they like if a student's really into the UX side, they can take those UX skills and go up to the next level, which is, I haven't totally figured out the next level yet because I don't have the students to populate it yet, but it's going to be something on like systems design and a little bit more service oriented, but something open-ended enough where it's mostly on like how do you plan a project and execute something based on the skills you learned in the previous classes. So students who are into the 3D stuff can stay in 3D. Those who are in 2D can stay mostly 2D and digital. And that's sort of how I see things in high school, is like, let's get you exposed to lots of things and make you a generalist, so that when you leave high school, you've got the basic fundamental skills, but you're also knowledgeable enough to sort of specialize in whatever major fits your interests the best.
It's almost like you're building a little mini university course where you learn a set of skills, the breadth of the skills across a diverse range at the first 2 years, and then you use that and then build something for your final year when you know. That's like a mini university course.
So the first one's kind of like electives within electives, because I'm an elective. So they take electives within the electives, and then they figure out what they like, and then move up to level 2, which doesn't exist yet. I haven't totally figured out levels 2 and 3 yet, just because they're not populated with students. That would be after this year. But they're starting to do client and designer work. So learning how to be the person who learns about a company, knows what a company needs, and develop a sort of like a client statement, where it's like, or a project brief. It's a project brief. So it's like, here's what I need the designer to do. This is how long each thing should take, and really planning that out and giving it to another student. And then it's on that second student to actually execute the client's vision. And then they'll do it vice versa and start to build out a studio culture of like working with a bunch of people, seeing how people's workflows differ, seeing what people like to see as clients, taking direction from a client to improve your design, improving your communication as a client to make sure you get what you want as efficiently as possible. And after they've done all that project planning work, then they can go into something more individualized, because it's like, in the intro level, I've made sure you're able to actually work hard and have the endurance to really see something through. Levels 2 and the beginning of level 3, it's like you know how to work professionally and plan out projects quickly. And then at the end of that, it's like, okay, you've proven yourself, here's a semester, do what you want with it. Ultimately, they leave with hopefully like 4 or 5 portfolio pieces, but then they're also leaving with a really strong knowledge of what they like in the creative field, and then also just the knowledge of how to take their work and turn it into something presentable, so that they're doing that along the way in college and leave naturally college with sort of that desire to show themselves off, because that's a necessity. And it's really exciting because I came in and I had 1 class of 4, and then I was doing collaborative work for the rest of my time, and now I've bumped that up to about 85 students. So when I showed up at St. Luke's, I was expecting a larger teaching load, But it turns out, just the way things shook out, I had one class of 4 students and not really much else to do when there wasn't teachers wanting to do projects for their classes. So what I did was I was like, I need to somehow get in front of more kids because I really want to be in a teaching capacity. We have at St. Luke's what's called mini courses, where you can do like, it meets twice a week, and you do like a fast unit to kind of just do whatever you want with a class for 2 weeks, which for me is not a huge deal because I get to do whatever I want all the time. But for like an English teacher who has a set curriculum, a chance to do something totally different is really exciting. But I took that as an opportunity to do like a very pure, like, we did cutting boards. It was very pure wood shop. A lot of students in our upper school hadn't really had any chance to actually use the wood shop tools because the program just wasn't run that way before me. And so I did cutting boards a bunch of times to get kids through the door, and then I piloted the ukulele project to see like how that would work. And then I also started a club with a student on building for nonprofits. So like he really did all the work. I can't take any credit for it, but like I facilitated a couple clubs that got upper school students going in. And then while all that was happening, so I ended up having about 40 kids come throughout the course of the year. And then every week in front of the whole school, I'd make we call it town meeting, it's like assembly. I had like a town meeting announcement that was like, these mini courses are happening. If you like them, come take my real classes next year. And so I did that. I sent out messages to like the newsletter. I sent out emails to parents. I was sending out emails to teachers. I did like a teacher cutting board workshop to be like, hey teachers, I want more kids. Tell your kids how awesome this is. I did like all these different marketing streams to get kids through the door. And then like in April, that's when like things really ramp up for enrollment. I was like every week I was doing that stuff. And so that's how I was able to bump it up really fast. But I really attributed to like getting a chance to figure out what the students want and then designing classes around that. So the students really wanted, there was really a desire for hands-on classes, so I made most of my topics hands-on, and that's really what filled. And advanced coursework. Like the second I had an advanced class, everyone was excited to kind of like get towards that. So like that's sort of how I built it out, and now I'm very happy that that's huge, because I'm hoping next year then the students are saying, oh, this class is awesome, like we'll stay in the program and grab a couple more. There's going to be a steady stream of kids coming through the levels as it evolves.
The momentum has started running.
Yeah, and so the momentum, I'm hoping, will just run on its own, so I don't have to do a whole big marketing campaign again. My advice for students who are interested in design and might have an inkling for education is that I would definitely see it through. That doesn't necessarily mean you go into education, but I would look into what openings are in your area, like for innovation, makerspace, design thinking, STEAM. Those are usually the keywords that get you through the door. And if you see that in a job title, you're usually in pretty good shape. They're very excited schools to meet people with our background, because it's hard to find people with a design background who actually have an interest in teaching. But there's what's called, at least in the American schools, there's what's called the maker movement, where all these schools are investing a lot of money in maker spaces but don't necessarily have a curriculum yet. So what's really exciting about this career path is, though you're working with students and it is really teaching, you are kind of a creative director, because you get to decide what kinds of projects you do, what types of tools you use, the types of people you get to work with, and that, as a person who's very early in my career, is a really exciting place to be, because at least in my industry experience, you're really executing someone else's vision, but in education you have a lot more freedom to do what you want. Thanks for listening to my story. For more designer stories and insights for teachers and students, stay tuned on 100 Designers Set. If you'd like to check out my work, the link to my website's right here. Thanks, see ya.